Welcome back to a place where stories unfold, secrets surface, and truth finds its way into the light. Today's story is one that will stay with you long after it ends. It's about love, betrayal, and a discovery so shocking it changed everything. Even after death, I never imagined that the man I loved for over a decade, the man I trusted with my life, would become a stranger to me after he was gone. His name was Daniel. We met when I was 20. He was charming, attentive, and had this calm, reassuring presence that made you feel like everything would be okay as long as he was around. He wasn't overly flashy, didn't make grand gestures, but he was consistent, reliable. The kind of man people said was husband material. And I believed them. We built a life together slowly. Weekend grocery trips, quiet dinners, inside jokes that no one else understood. After 2 years, we got married in a small ceremony surrounded by close family and friends. Nothing extravagant, just meaningful. Looking back, there were signs, subtle things I ignored because I trusted him. Because I loved him, Daniel traveled often for work. He worked in logistics, managing supply chains across regions, or at least that's what he told me. Sometimes he'd be gone for days, occasionally a week. At the time, it made sense. His job was demanding, and he was climbing quickly. Whenever I asked questions, he had answers. Not defensive, not irritated, just smooth, reasonable explanations. And I never doubted him. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of shared birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. 10 years of believing I knew the man sleeping next to me. Then one ordinary morning, everything ended. Daniel died in a car accident. Just like that, no warning. No goodbye. 1 minute, he was texting me about picking up dinner on his way home. And the next, I was standing in a hospital hallway, trying to process words that didn't make sense. He didn't make it. Grief doesn't hit you all at once. It creeps in. First comes shock. Then numbness. Then waves of sadness so heavy you feel like you're drowning. The days leading up to the funeral were a blur. Phone calls, paperwork, relatives I barely knew offering condolences. I moved through it all like I was watching someone else's life. At the funeral, people came from everywhere. Coworkers, distant cousins, old friends, but there were also faces I didn't recognize at first. I didn't think much of it. Funerals bring unexpected people, old connections you didn't know still existed. Then I saw her. She was standing near the back, holding the hand of a little boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He looked familiar. Not in a way I could immediately place, but something about him made my chest tighten. The woman noticed me looking. Our eyes met. There was something in her expression, something that felt too heavy for a stranger. After the service, as people began to leave, she approached me. "Are you his wife?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. I nodded. Yes. There was a pause. Then she said words that didn't make sense. "I think we need to talk." I remember feeling confused. Maybe she was a coworker. Maybe Daniel had helped her in some way. We stepped aside. The boy stayed close to her, clutching her hand. She took a deep breath. "My name is Laura," she said, "and this is Ethan." I smiled politely, still not understanding. Then she said it. "He's Daniel's son." The world didn't shatter, it didn't explode, it just stopped. I stared at her, waiting for her to correct herself. To say she misspoke, but she didn't. "I know how this sounds," she continued quickly. "I didn't want to do this here, but I didn't know how else to reach you." My mind was racing. "This isn't funny," I said, though my voice didn't sound like mine. "I'm not joking," she said softly. "Daniel has been part of our lives for 9 years. 9 years. That meant almost our entire marriage." I looked down at the boy. Ethan. He had Daniel's eyes. That same calm, steady gaze, and suddenly, that strange familiarity made sense. I felt sick. "You're lying," I said. But even as I said it, something inside me knew. "She wasn't. I can show you," she said. "Photos, messages, whatever you need." I didn't want to see, but I couldn't walk away either. We exchanged numbers. I barely remember the rest of the day. People spoke to me, hugged me, offered condolences, but their words felt distant, muffled. All I could think about was what she said. A son. 9 years. A second life. That night, after everyone had left and the house was finally quiet, I sat alone in the living room. Daniel's things were everywhere. His jacket on the chair, his watch on the table, the mug he used every morning still sitting in the sink. And suddenly, none of it felt real. My phone buzzed. A message from Laura. I'm so sorry. I know this is a lot. I can come tomorrow if you want to talk. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, come at 10. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything in my head. Every late work trip. Every unexplained delay. Every moment I chose trust over suspicion. By morning, I wasn't even sure what I felt anymore. Anger, betrayal, or just emptiness. At exactly 10 a.m., there was a knock on the door. Laura stood there, alone this time. She looked nervous. I didn't bring Ethan, she said. I thought it might be too much. I nodded and let her in. We sat across from each other at the dining table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she opened her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were photographs. Daniel holding a newborn baby. Daniel at a park, pushing a swing. Daniel at a birthday party, smiling with a little boy covered in cake. Ethan, their son. My husband, living a life I knew nothing about. Tears blurred my vision. But I forced myself to keep looking. Where did you meet him? I asked. 7 years before you, she said quietly. We were together for a while, but things didn't work out. Then, he came back. Said he wanted to be involved when I told him I was pregnant. I felt like I couldn't breathe. He told me he wasn't married. She added, of course he didn't. Did you ever suspect? I asked. She shook her head. He was careful. He had explanations for everything. Said his work kept him busy. I didn't question it. We were both silent for a moment. Two women sitting in the wreckage of the same lie. I'm not here to cause problems, she said. I just thought you deserved to know. Deserved. The word felt heavy. Because knowing didn't bring clarity. It only brought more questions. Over the next few days, everything unraveled. I went through Daniel's belongings with a new perspective, and suddenly, the signs were everywhere. A second phone I never knew about, hidden in his office drawer. Receipts from places he claimed he'd never been. A bank account I didn't recognize. It was like discovering a parallel universe, one where Daniel was a completely different person. The man I loved and the man she knew were the same, and yet they weren't. I met Ethan a week later. I didn't plan to, it just happened. Laura had brought him along when she came to drop off more documents. He stood in the doorway, looking unsure. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to a child who unknowingly shattered your entire world? But then he smiled, and in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't the lie. He was the truth Daniel left behind. Hi, he said softly. Hi, I replied. We talked a little. Simple things. School, his favorite games, what he liked to do on weekends. And every time he laughed, I saw Daniel. Not the man who betrayed me, but the man I once loved. And that made it harder, not easier, because it reminded me that the person I believed in wasn't entirely fake. He just wasn't entirely honest either. As weeks turned into months, I had to make choices. What to do with the house, what to do with the life we built, and what to do with the truth. I could have walked away completely, cut ties, pretended none of it existed, but I didn't, because Ethan existed, and he didn't deserve to be erased just because his father made terrible choices. Neither did Laura. So, slowly, cautiously, we started to build something unexpected. Not a friendship, not at first, just understanding. We shared stories. Compared memories, filled in gaps for each other, and piece by piece, we began to understand the full picture of who Daniel really was. A man who loved deeply, but lived dishonestly. A man who tried to be everything to everyone, and ended up betraying us all, including himself. People often ask me if I hate him, and the truth is, I don't know. Some days I do. Some days I feel nothing at all, and some days, I remember the man who held my hand through difficult times, who made me laugh when I needed it most, who built a life with me. And I realize, love doesn't disappear just because the truth changes, it just becomes something else, something more complicated. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that people are rarely just one thing. They're not just good or bad. They're layers, contradictions, secrets we may never fully understand. Daniel was both the man I loved and the man who lied to me for 10 years. Both can be true, and accepting that is the hardest part. Today, my life looks very different. Not what I planned, not what I expected, but it's real. And for the first time in a long time, there are no secrets. I wish I could say that once everything was out in the open, life slowly returned to normal. But the truth is, there was no normal to go back to. Because the life I thought I had never really existed the way I believed it did. In the weeks after meeting Ethan, I found myself stuck between two versions of reality. The one I lived in for 10 years, and the one that had been hidden from me the entire time. Every object in the house felt different now. That couch we picked together, he had probably sat on another one somewhere else, laughing with another family. The kitchen we painted on a Sunday afternoon, he had likely eaten dinners I knew nothing about, in a place I had never seen. Even our bedroom felt unfamiliar. Because how do you share a space with someone for 10 years and not truly know who they are? I started questioning everything, every memory, every moment, every I love you. Were they real? Or just part of the role he was playing? That question haunted me the most, because if it was all a lie, then what did that make me? Just a character in his story. Or worse, a convenience. One evening I sat with Laura again. This time it wasn't tense, it wasn't confrontational, it was quiet, almost surreal. We sat across from each other with cups of tea, like two old friends catching up, except the only thing we had in common was the same man. I used to think I knew him better than anyone, she said softly. I let out a small, humorless laugh. Same. There was a pause. Then she asked something I hadn't been ready for. Do you think he loved us? I didn't answer right away, because that question didn't have a simple answer. I think he did, I said finally. In his own way. She nodded slowly, staring into her cup. I used to wonder why he never stayed the night, she admitted. He always had an excuse. Early meetings, long drives. Something. My chest tightened, because I knew exactly where he was going, brought home to me. And I used to wonder why he was always so tired when he got back from work trips. I said quietly. We looked at each other, and in that moment, everything connected. To separate lives, perfectly balanced, carefully managed, until they weren't. Do you hate me? She asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. What? No, you should, she said. I was part of it, even if I didn't know. I shook my head. No. You weren't, I said firmly. We were both lied to. And that was the truth. For a long time, I thought there had to be someone to blame besides him. Someone I could point to and say, this is your fault. But there wasn't single quotes. There was just him, and the choices he made as time passed. More pieces came together. I discovered how he managed his schedule, how he kept separate finances. How he carefully avoided any overlap between our worlds. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Planned. Maintained for years. And that realization hurt more than anything else. Because it meant this wasn't a mistake, it was a decision, repeated over and over again, every single day. I remember finding an old notebook in his office. At first, it looked like work notes. But as I flipped through it, I realized It was something else. Dates, appointments, reminders, but not just for work, for us and for them. Dinner with L, anniversary, don't forget flowers. School event, weekend trip, say, conference. My hands were shaking as I read it because it was all there. Both lives. Organized, scheduled, balanced. Like a business operation. And suddenly, it hit me. I wasn't just part of his life. I was part of his system. That realization broke something in me, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Like a crack spreading through glass. After that, I stopped trying to understand why. Because there is no why that makes something like this make sense. Instead, I started focusing on what came next. What kind of life did I want now? Who was I without him? That question was harder than I expected, because for 10 years, so much of my identity had been tied to being his wife, and now, that role felt meaningless. One afternoon, I decided to visit a place Laura had mentioned, a small park where Daniel used to take Ethan. I don't know why I went, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, or maybe I just needed to see it for myself. The park was simple, a few swings, a slide, some benches under large trees, nothing special, and yet, it felt heavy, like it held pieces of a life I had never seen. I sat on one of the benches and looked around, trying to imagine him there, laughing, pushing Ethan on the swing, being a father, a version of him I never got to witness. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger, I felt grief, not just for the man I lost, but for the truth I never had, because part of me would have wanted to know that side of him. Even if it hurt, even if it changed everything, at least it would have been real. A few days later, Ethan asked me something that stayed with me. Did my dad love you? I wasn't prepared for that. We were sitting in the living room, working on one of his school projects. Laura was in the kitchen, and out of nowhere, he asked it. I looked at him, at those familiar eyes, and I realized this wasn't about me, it was about him, trying to understand his father. Yes, I said gently. I think he did. Ethan nodded, like he expected that answer. He loved us too, he said. I know. I replied, and that was the complicated truth we both had to live with. He wasn't just a liar. He wasn't just a husband. He wasn't just a father. He was all of those things at the same time, and somehow, that made everything harder to process. Months went by, then a year. Life slowly started to take shape again, different, but stable. Laura and I found a rhythm, not forced, not awkward, just natural. We didn't become best friends overnight, but we became something stronger, in a strange way, to people who understood each other in a way no one else could, because we had lived through the same truth from different sides. As for Ethan, he became a part of my life in a way I never expected, not as a replacement for anything, not as an obligation, but as a connection. To the past, to the truth, and maybe to something honest. I never tried to take on a role that wasn't mine. I wasn't his mother, he had one, but I was someone who cared, and sometimes that was enough. Looking back now, I don't see my life as a lie anymore. I see it as incomplete, because the love I felt was real. The memories I had were real. They were just missing pieces, and those pieces didn't disappear. They just existed somewhere else, in another home, in another life. And now, I know both sides. If you're listening to this and wondering how someone could live like that, how they could maintain two families for so long, I don't have an answer, but I've learned something important. People are capable of carrying more than one truth, even when those truths contradict each other, even when they hurt the people they love. And sometimes, the consequences don't come until it's too late, until there are no explanations left, no apologies, no chance to ask why, only the aftermath. Only the truth, and the choice of what to do with it. For me, I chose to face it, to understand it, and eventually, to move forward with it, not because it was easy, but because it was the only way to live honestly again. This wasn't the life I planned, but it's the one I have now, and for the first time in years, I know that everything in it is real.
That's all for today's story. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. This is Storyova, where your story matters. And I'll see you in the next one.